I'm a photographer, and my niche is urban exploration, or urbex, as we call it. I spend my nights seeking out forgotten places, the skeletal remains of buildings that society has left behind. There's a certain beauty in their decay, a quiet tragedy captured in the peeling paint and shattered glass. But there's also something else, a feeling that settles over you when you're alone in a place that used to be full of life. It's a weight, a heavy silence that holds more than just dust. A few months ago, I got a lead on an abandoned children's hospital on the city's outskirts. It had been closed for 30 years, a hulking, concrete ghost that was rumored to be haunted. I went in alone, armed with nothing but my camera, a flashlight, and a deep-seated belief that ghosts were just figments of a scared imagination. The hospital was exactly as I had imagined. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay, and the profound, bone-deep quiet was almost a presence in itself. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating discarded toys, faded crayon drawings on the walls, and the occasional rusted gurney. The first few floors were uneventful, a sterile landscape of forgotten medical equipment and empty patient rooms. I snapped photos of a forgotten rocking horse, its paint chipped and peeling, and a small, faded teddy bear sitting alone in the middle of a hallway, as if waiting for a child who would never return. But as I descended into the basement, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, and a profound, bone-deep quiet settled in. It was a silence that felt less like an absence of sound and more like a heavy presence. I was down there for an hour, taking photos of the old morgue and the boiler room, when I heard it. A faint, low sound, like a child's laughter, echoing from somewhere in the tunnels that snaked off the main corridor. It was a single, high-pitched giggle, the kind of sound a child makes when they're playing a game of hide-and-seek. My blood ran cold. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew I was alone in the building. I hadn't seen a single sign of a squatter or a fellow explorer. The laughter came again, this time from a different tunnel, closer than before. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the acoustics, a sound from outside reverberating in the hollow space. But the laughter was too clear, too distinct. It was the sound of a living child. The second giggle was followed by a series of low, rhythmic thuds, a sound like a small, heavy object being dragged across a concrete floor. I dropped my camera, the sound of the glass shattering on the floor, a jarring interruption to the unsettling silence. I ran, not looking back, my mind a blank slate of pure panic. I didn't stop until I was out in the street, the cold night air a welcome slap to my face. I promised myself I would never go back, but the memory of that laughter was a hook in my mind, a chilling question that I couldn't ignore. A week later, I went back. This time, I was determined to find the source. I went straight to the basement, my camera and flashlight in hand, my nerves a jangling mess. I was in the morgue, taking a picture of an old autopsy table, when I heard the laughter again. This time, it wasn't a single giggle, but a chorus of voices, a symphony of small, childish sounds that filled the entire space. It was coming from the walk-in freezer, a massive metal box with a heavy, rusted door. The laughter was muffled, as if it was coming from a place where sound couldn't escape. I walked to the door and pressed my ear against the cold metal. The laughter stopped, and a new sound began, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like a child's finger lightly drumming on a metal surface. The tapping was followed by a faint, wheezing voice. A whisper so thin and dry it sounded like it was scraping against my eardrum. "Help," the voice said. It was a child's voice, a small, lost sound that made my blood run cold. I backed away from the door, my mind a whirlwind of terror. The tapping stopped, and the laughter started again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a happy giggle. It was laced with a chilling, malevolent edge, a sound that was pure, unadulterated evil. I ran, not looking back, my mind a blank slate of pure panic. I didn't stop until I was out of the building. The last thing I heard, as I sprinted away, was the sound of the hospital's old fire alarm system, a piercing, insistent shriek that seemed to be celebrating my terrified escape. The alarm was a new sound, a different kind of horror, a warning that I had ignored for too long. The laughter was the ghost's game. The alarm was its prize. I left my camera behind, a sacrifice to the children that were trapped in the old hospital, and I have never gone back. Every town has one that build and everyone knows to stay away from. For us, it was the old Northwood Asylum. It had been abandoned for over 50 years, a massive, Gothic stone structure perched on a hill just outside of town. We all had stories about it, urban legends passed down from older siblings. People would go in on dares and come out pale, gibbering, or not at all. My friends and I, being the cliché teenagers we were, thought we were above it all. We thought it was just an empty building and the stories were just to scare tourists. We were wrong. One Friday night, with a couple of six-packs and flashlights, we decided to break the unspoken rule and go inside. Our goal was simple: get in, take a picture from the 4th floor window that overlooked the town, and get out. The front door was long gone, just a gaping maw of darkness. We stepped inside, and the air hit us like a physical thing, cold and heavy, smelling of dust, decay, and something else. Something I can only describe as the lingering scent of despair. Our flashlights cut through the absolute blackness, revealing a grand, decaying entryway with peeling wallpaper and a magnificent staircase that seemed to climb into nothingness. The floorboards groaned under our weight, each step a protest against our intrusion. The building was a maze of hallways, identical doors leading to what we imagined were patient rooms. We'd go a few feet, and the flashlights would catch a fleeting flicker of movement just at the edge of the light. We'd laugh it off as bats or rats, but our laughter was hollow, swallowed by the oppressive silence. It was a silence that was far from empty. It was full of a low, continuous static that hummed in the back of my mind, a feeling of being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. The real fear began on the 2nd floor. As we were walking down a long, narrow hallway, we heard a sound. It was the distinct, rhythmic scrape of something heavy being dragged across the floor above us. We all froze, our flashlights pointed up at the ceiling. The scraping was slow and deliberate, a painful, drawn-out sound. It would stop and then start again, moving from one end of the floor to the other. Our initial bravado was replaced by a cold, stomach-turning dread. One of my friends, a tough guy named Mike, whispered, "It's just the wind." But we all knew it wasn't. The sound had a weight to it, a purpose. We started to move faster, our steps hurried and nervous, our flashlights dancing on the walls, revealing nothing but peeling paint and cobwebs. We reached the stairs to the 3rd floor, our hearts pounding. We looked back down the hall we had just come from, and that's when we saw it. A single, small, child's rocking horse, painted a faded blue, was slowly rocking back and forth in the middle of the hallway. No wind, no draft, just the slow, deliberate rhythm of the rocking horse. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen, because it was impossible. We scrambled up the stairs to the 4th floor, the rhythmic creak of the rocking horse chasing us. The 4th floor was a long, open room, a large space that had likely been a communal area. The far wall was a series of large, grimy windows, and the window we were looking for was at the very end, The air here was even colder, and the low hum in my mind was now a persistent buzz. As we got closer to the window, the humming got louder, and the scraping sound from the floor below us stopped. It was replaced by a new sound, a low, wet, smacking sound, like a mouth opening and closing. It was coming from a corner of the room, just at the edge of my flashlight beam. I tried to shine my light on it, but the beam seemed to bend around the spot, the light refusing to land there. The smacking grew faster, more frantic, and then a new sound joined it, a low, guttural growl, full of a deep, agonizing hunger. I saw it then, not with my eyes, but with a horrifying certainty that slammed into my mind. The smacking was not a mouth. It was a large, wet, distorted shape, its body a mass of what looked like fused, elongated limbs, and it was peeling itself off the wall, a horrible, slithering motion. It had no face, just a single, pulsing red light in the center of its mass, and it was growing larger, absorbing the very air around it. We didn't even think. We turned and ran, scrambling down the stairs, the sound of the creature slithering. Movements in the rhythmic, wet smacking chasing us. We flew out of the front door, bursting into the night air, gasping for breath. The sounds of the asylum now just a whisper in the wind. We ran all the way back to town, not stopping until we were under the bright, reassuring glow of the streetlights. We never went back to the asylum, and we never spoke of it again. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is still, I hear it, the slow, rhythmic scraping of something being dragged across a floor. And I know, with a bone-deep certainty, that some places aren't just abandoned. They're occupied. Everyone who works in shipping and receiving knows about the old warehouse on the edge of town. It's an enormous, derelict structure that's been abandoned for decades. The city bought it years ago, but every plan to redevelop it has fallen through. The local lore says it's because of the whispers. My friend, Jake, a night supervisor at a nearby distribution center, had a key to the place. His dad had been a foreman there back in the day, and for some reason, the family had kept it. He was a guy who thrived on risk, and he'd been bugging me for weeks to go in with him. I'd always laughed it off, but a couple of months ago, my curiosity finally got the better of me. The rumors weren't just about ghosts. They were about something else. Something that moved on the night shift. So, one Friday night, we parked my truck a quarter-mile away, armed with a flashlight and a single can of beer, and walked into the yawning darkness of the place. The air inside was thick and heavy, a combination of concrete dust and something bitter, like burnt sugar. The hum of the distant transformer was the only sound, a low, continuous vibration that seemed to fill the entire space. Our flashlights cut through the impenetrable blackness, revealing a cavernous interior of rusted shelving, broken pallets, and collapsed cardboard boxers. The place was a tomb of forgotten goods. As we walked deeper into the warehouse, the hum grew louder, more insistent, and I began to feel it in my teeth. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pressure. We explored for a solid hour, weaving through the endless rows of shelves, our feet kicking up dust with every step. I felt a chill, a deep, pervasive cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a cold that felt like a presence. The first strange occurrence was a sound, a faint, low scrape, like a piece of metal dragging on concrete. We both stopped dead in our tracks, our flashlights sweeping the area. Nothing. We moved on. But the scraping started again, just behind us this time. It wasn't moving. It was stationary, a constant, low drag that seemed to be coming from the empty air. We tried to find a source, but the moment we shone our lights on the area, the sound would stop. The moment we looked away, it would start again. Jake, who was a skeptic, started to look nervous. The easy confidence he had at the front door was gone, replaced by a tense silence. The whispers started around the same time. Faint, hype voices that seemed to be coming from the humming. They were in a language I didn't recognize, a jumble of syllables that sounded like something being played backward. But the tone was clear, malevolent, and ancient. We were about a third of the way through the warehouse when we came to a large, open area. In the center of the space, a single, rusted conveyor belt stood alone, a monument to a defunct system. We circled it, our flashlights playing over its groaning metal. The hum was louder here, a vibrating chorus that made the air feel electric. That's when we saw it. A single, small, gray stone, perfectly smooth and round, sitting on the center of the belt. It looked out of place, a piece of the outside world in this place of ruin. Jake, in a moment of pure, unadulterated curiosity, reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact, the stone glowed with a faint, sickly green light. The hum intensified, a piercing screech that slammed into my eardrums. The whispers stopped. A low, grinding sound began, and the conveyor belt, which had been dead for 50 years, slowly, with a series of groans and metallic screeches, began to move. The belt was carrying something dark and impossibly long, a shapeless mass that was slowly, painstakingly moving towards the other end of the belt. We stood there, frozen in a cocktail of horror and fascination, watching the shapeless mass move. It was getting closer, and the whispers, which had been silent, now began to scream, their voices a cacophony of agony. The shape on the belt had no discernible features, no head, no limbs, but as it got closer, I saw it. The entire surface of the mass was covered in what looked like faces, pressed into the skin, their mouths open in silent, terrified screams. The whispers were coming from them. 1,000 voices, all screaming at once. They weren't whispering. They were trapped, and the object wasn't a mess. It was a single, long, impossibly large tongue, and it was dragging itself through the warehouse. It surfaced a writhing mass of human faces. It was feeding on the despair and the decay of the building, and out was getting closer. The whispers, the humming, the scraping, they were all connected. It was a sound that had no source, because it was the sound of a place eating itself alive. We ran. We didn't even look back, our feet kicking up dust as we scrambled back through the endless rows of shelves. The screams followed us, 1,000. Tiny voices of the damned, all begging for release. We flew out of the warehouse, our lungs burning, our legs screaming in protest. We didn't stop until we were back in my truck, speeding away from the humming, screaming thing we had just seen. We drove 4 miles in silence, a heavy dread sitting in the car with us. We never spoke about it. We never went back. But I know what's in that warehouse. And sometimes, late at night, when the hum of my own refrigerator is too loud, I hear it. The faint, high-pitched whispers, all speaking a language I don't understand, but whose meaning I know. He's trapped. He's trapped. And I know they aren't talking about anyone else. They're talking about me. Because a part of me, a deep, terrified part of me, is still in that warehouse, and it's screaming.